Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening. Command Control Power is brought to you commercial-free thanks to the support of our community. Our VIP supporters include Jason Detbarn of Adigy.com, Collide.co, John Brown of GroveTech.co, Watchman Monitoring, and Adam Angst of Tidbits Content Network. Thanks very much for supporting the show. We have a couple of recent pledges to our Patreon. I just wanted to thank Rolf Woodward for becoming a patron. Thanks, Rolf. Good to have you joining us. And also Bruce Corson, longtime friend of the show, just updated his pledge to a higher level. So we really appreciate you as well, Bruce. And for anyone else out there who either doesn't know that we do a whole separate show specifically for patrons that comes out once or twice monthly. And if you are a patron, maybe you're not even aware of that. But for any listeners out there, check out commandcontrolpower.com and click on support to pledge on Patreon. And you too can listen to the regular show that we do that's a little bit more behind the scenes. And there's a couple of great episodes in there that we sometimes reference on the public show. You may be wondering what we're talking about, and that's what it is. So welcome, Rolf, and thanks, Bruce, for bumping up your pledge. It really means a lot to see new people joining. So thank you all for pledging and supporting us on Command Control Power.
This happened literally the other day. I have a client reach out to me, and this is one of those clients that I've been sending them messages I would say for the last 49 days or so, that their time machine isn't working. And this is a complaint that I've recently surfaced on other shows that we've done. Time and time again, I think time machine across the board, it doesn't matter what version of the OS they're on, I think it's just hopelessly broken. I have clients on Catalina, Monterey, Ventura. We get them outfitted with a brand new drive. I do the proper formatting. I can't get these things to go. Days go by and it says waiting to complete the first backup. I'm up to my ears in this, and I'm done with Time Machine on the ones that are hopelessly broken. And I have no idea why. I go into the bundle, I delete the in progress file, that doesn't work. I completely erase the drive. It's a brand new drive, just something fresh in from Amazon. It doesn't back up. Have you guys seen this?
What drive? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
it's Dolly Drive. Are you guys familiar with that?
I was not expecting that. Yeah, nicely done.
It doesn't matter. It could be a Seagate. It could be a LaCie. LaCie isn't a drive manufacturer. They just rebadge other people's drives. But Seagate, Western Digital, I don't do some off-brand. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, I've standardized on G drives over the years. We used to recommend the G drive mobile USB-C, I think it was called. And that was like our go-to. It was generally in stock at Amazon, available in all the normal capacities you'd want, cheap enough, whatever. We were using it for a few years. And then lately, we've started to see drives that are a year and a half old. It's not completing the backup. And I've seen some weird stuff too. Something doesn't seem right about it. In 3 different cases, the drive had exactly 50 gigs available. It stopped working. Either Time Machine has a hard stop when there's 50 gigs left or something in certain macOS versions, or these particular drives just flip out and start reporting 50 gigs available when it's not
I've seen that too. I've seen that too, Joe. Yep. And I've seen things where it says you can get the report and it says pre-thinning. And okay, so it's doing its housekeeping. It's trying to free up space from older drives. The things that we're familiar with that Time Machine does. And it still won't do anything. I've seen it do identifying changes, and it'll like parse through a number of numbers, and then the thing will just stop. I'm just so done with this. So in every case, I tell the client, this is hopelessly broken. We're going to buy you a copy of Carbon Copy Cloner. And that's what we're going to do. And that's going to be your Time Machine backup. Screw Time Machine. I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't matter the OS. Like I said, it's just broken.
I predict Apple will fix this in macOS Arizona Bay. Anyone get the reference? Tool fans out there will get the reference. But anyway, I do tend to think that like Apple's going to be continuing to work on Time Machine, but I do think there are issues with maybe some of these drives. Like I've seen those G Drive, USB-C, mobile, whatever that I mentioned, I think just like there was a bad batch or something, or they just don't last very long. So we've switched to a different brand. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it in your case, Jerry, because I haven't seen the same kind of widespread issues, but there's just been a few where it seems like the drive is really slow. I can't tell if it's the drive or what it's trying to back up. And it also, some of the aspects of Time Machine have surprised me over the years. I don't know, for a network drive, AFP versus SMB, it seems for a while, I forget when Apple deprecated AFP for Time Machine backups, but even when SMB was the default for file sharing, I think Time Machine still use AFP. Like there's just weird kind of legacy stuff relating to Time Machine that I just wonder if they're going to be cleaning that up even further. We switched to the G Drive. It's the, you guys have probably seen it, the Armor ATD. It's like
I thought you moved on to the H drives because you were done with the G drives.
Right. Yeah, G Drive is like an old Windows thing, right? Just go to your G Drive, click on the G Drive. And I just had to look up my notes for one of the issues we found where this guy had this, just no matter what, his MacBook Air would not complete a backup using Time Machine to this external drive. He ended up buying a new drive, still wouldn't complete a backup. So then we're like, okay. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so in this case, I got
you're getting Jerry all heated.
Yeah. So but I did some real digging on this, and I found that there was actually an issue where the contacts database was spewing files into the file system really fast, or it was really weird. It was inconsistent and sometimes would be and I thought, okay, the drive is having I/O issues. That can happen on a computer, even though that used to be more of an issue, obviously, with rotational drives. That can still happen with an SD on a modern Mac, but it was inconsistent. So I would run these scans. At first, it was inconclusive. I couldn't figure out where is this data that's supposedly here that I can't identify, and also why is the I/O so bad? So I ended up finding that in his case, it was a backup of the Contacts app that was made at some point. I'm not sure if he did it or we did it. Like you can go into the Contacts app and save a backup, and contacts are, 10, 20 megabytes or something total in an extreme case maybe. And this was gigabytes of data that was in this Contacts backup, which if you then explore this ABU or whatever it is file, it's comprised of lots of little files and things. And it was insane amounts of files. The number of files was crazy. So we ultimately found that there was this backup that was causing files to be reduplicated behind the scenes or whatever. But we basically fixed this issue by deleting these weird old Contacts backups, which then solved his issue backing up, because we did the same workaround. At first, we gave up on Time Machine and just use Carbon Copy Cloner. And then he'd have this problem where the clone, after a few months go by, the clone was having issues too. So we got back into it, and that's when we figured out the underlying problem finally. But I don't know if that explains any of the cases you've dealt with, Jerry. Probably not. But
well, here's the thing. I have no time for these shenanigans, right? The application is completely opaque. If something doesn't work with Carbon Copy Cloner, there's a one-step process where you put in your email address, you push a button, it attaches the logs, and they get back to you and they say, this is what's happening. Because there's some sort of a paper trail. Here, there's just nothing. It's just like you sit around and you jerk around with this thing. And again, I'm doing this for free because this is included in my service. I'm going to make sure your computer's backing up. I'm just so done with Time Machine.
I just actually double checked my notes on this. In fact, the backup I mentioned, the Contacts backup, was a thing that we made. That wasn't the issue. The issue was in the library, the user library folder, application support, address book, which they still call that folder, even though it's not called Contacts, sources, and then some kind of like crazy GUI 38F3DA93- whatever. So that folder had thousands of files in it with the word corrupt in the name. That's why I was thinking this was something to do with corruption in this case. Address book -v22-abcddb. I don't know who names this stuff. .ffb, like whatever, some GUID thing. .corrupt -WAL. So WAL is like some kind of database helper file thing. I don't really know. It's something in the SQLite database for the mail app. But anyway, this is just one example of the files that were in this sources folder where the address book app or the contacts app is supposed to be storing its database of contacts. And all of these files together, all the corrupt ones, were 588 gigabytes, according to my notes. So in this case, I think these files were respawning. So it wasn't the backup because that didn't make sense. It was these live files that the address book app would reduplicate over and over or something. It just totally got crazy. And I think what was happening was, in his case, when the contacts app was active, or maybe just all the time when whatever background process was trying to sync his contacts or whatever, it would continuously spew these files to the file system, which would then cause the backup to never complete because it always had more data to back up. For every bit that it copied, there were like 10 more megabytes to copy from the address book freaking out. So essentially the answer was it just never completed. And so that was this one example. The reason I point this out is because it could be an indication that there's some underlying issue going on in the system that, maybe not present on a day-to-day basis. Maybe it's a little slow. If it was your Mac, you might notice it's a little slow, but a client's going to just be, that's the way the computer is. It's a little slow. They may not notice that behind the scenes, this crazy stuff is going on, and Time Machine can't deal with that because it's just not efficient even on a good day. And certainly copying data to an external rotational hard drive, there is a bottleneck there over USB. And so it can't deal with constantly changing files, I think. And so maybe in some cases there is an underlying problem that might need to be looked into. But I don't blame you for punting to go to Carbon Copy Cloner when it just doesn't work.
What are the resources to chase all this BS down? That's the thing that I don't understand. Whose fault is it that this thing is respawning? Not the user's fault. And the fact I could see, okay, network drives, they're a problem unto themselves, backing up to Synologies. All right, I'll give you that. That's something that maybe you need to really roll up your sleeves and dig into. And there's a payoff there. But these other reasons where you get a brand new drive, it connect it, and it's just not backing up. What am I going to do? Reinstall the operating system? I don't have enough time for that. So this is it. I'm just so done with screwing around with that technology because it's broken.
Yeah.
It's broken. There's no logs. They're not giving us any help here within the app itself, or there's no easy way to read Time Machine logs. I'm sure you could dive into the console and get there somehow. But
even that's not easy anymore.
I looked at Howard Oakley's site. There's nothing. He doesn't know either. So
if he doesn't know, then
we got a real problem.
Jerry, can I give you one more? So I'm just looking over how I got to this conclusion. So this was how problematic this whole situation was. And again, this might be a case study for other problems that are underlying some of these other Time Machine issues. So the problem was we couldn't even identify how much space was being used on the internal drive. We ran a scan using Carbon Copy Cloner, and it was so slow that it basically never completed. I don't remember if OmniDisk Sweeper crashed eventually or we just gave up because it just took forever and never completed. So I ended up stopping everything I could stop, quit every app I could quit. I just made the system like as minimal as possible. I reopened, after a fresh start, I reopened OmniDisk Sweeper, and I ran a scan of the space used only on the external hard drive. And what that pointed me to, because at the time, the external hard drive was a Carbon Copy Cloner clone. So it wasn't a Time Machine drive, which would have been probably a nightmare to try to calculate the size of, but it was just a straight clone. So I ran the scan of that drive, and that's what pointed me to the address book behind the scenes stuff in the library of the user on the external drive. And then that's what led me to actually go to that location on the internal drive, of course, which is where the clone data came from. And that's how I figured out that the address book data was corrupting itself. And I was able to delete it all, recreate the account in address book or whatever, and fix the underlying issue. But that's the kind of troubleshooting that was necessary just to get to that answer. To your point, it's really hard to actually find. That was the Time Machine problem, was actually an address book problem.
Joe, I've said it over and over again. You're like a dog with a bone.
This was after a year. We punted a year ago for this guy because we were like, I don't know, can't figure out Time Machine, brand new drive, brand new Mac. And yeah. And so then, but when that failed, when Carbon Copy Cloner started to crap out, that's when I went after the bone again, I guess.
Joe, what do you think of all this nonsense, Sam?
I was going to ask one more question related to that, and maybe I missed it, but once you corrected that and were able to back up, have you investigated further to see if those files are still getting recreated?
Yeah, no, I did. I gave it another day or whatever. I quit and reopened the Contacts app, restarted all the things, and found that it was not taking up any extra space. Calculated that it was using 140 megabytes. I made a note here in that total, in that sources folder. And he had 3 or 4 different servers he's syncing with, thousands of contacts, whatever. So that number seemed reasonable, and it was stable after a while. I'm pretty sure it's totally fixed. And I don't remember the specifics. I might have some of it documented with what got it to stop having that issue, because it was almost corrupted files in that database location were the problem itself. But after deleting all those and then deleting the account and recreating it, it was fine. Of course, the downside was, well, I don't know what I just deleted. I had to basically tell him, like, I made a backup and I put it in a different location. I think that's what I was first referring to from my notes when I first tried to recount this story. So I had the backup of whatever was in Contacts app. But yeah, I had to tell him at one point, I don't know how to even have you review what I'm about to delete. This is just, it says corrupt. That's all I know. So it's probably not useful to you. Yeah.
I think Carbon Copy Cloner has always been a good, safe tool to use. So I think, Jerry, you're just saying screw it, which I get. If you're having that much trouble, what are you going to do? We can't all be Joe. So we got to either figure it out.
We go out of business, Sam, you and me.
Yeah. I think we do have some clients that we do still use Time Machine with, but I've been happy about the fact that in a lot of offices we work with, we've tried to institute a policy. If it's on your computer, it's not getting backed up, which is, some places that's not fine. That's not going to work everywhere. I get that. But some of the companies that we're working with are really cool with that. Yeah, they need to put it in our cloud, or if we have a server, and if they've put something on a local computer, then it's their ass, basically, if they've done that.
Yeah, Joe charges so much, Sam, that he has an unlimited budget to work on these problems.
Yeah, I wish. This 90% of everything I just said is probably like comped time, and it's just a learning experience for me, or at least half. In this case, I know that I gave the guy a really good. Here, I'll tell you right now, I'm on the invoice thing. Originally, yeah, I spent 2 hours troubleshooting it. I charged him for 1 hour. So there you go. So I probably spent more than 2 hours, honestly, but that's what I showed on the invoice. I have another one I can tell you guys about in a little bit that was a whole different situation that was also like dog with a bone kind of style troubleshooting that was really annoying and frustrating, and I think I've got the answer to it. But
maybe I could sub you out to work on my Time Machine issues.
No, thank you. Hey, I tried to work on your Time Machine issues by creating a remediation script in Adigy, and I don't want to get emails about that, so I'm just going to not use it.
Don't you remember, Jerry deployed it to every single computer out there?
Right, I know.
That's when stuff got really bad.
Yeah. By the way, you can turn off the emails for those remediations. That's an option. I just chose to have that enabled on my side so I can see that my script is not erasing somebody's data or whatever. But now I have them automatically archived, thanks to a rule on my mail server to just put them in a folder called muted alerts. So I have the record there if I need to quickly see if something, obviously you can check the Adigy log as well. But I've noticed a ton of those, even with just a few clients where I've deployed it, because I've deployed it for clients where they have a Synology, basically, because it tends to happen with network backups only. Although I've seen this same kind of bug happen to the direct attached drives as well, but just to a much lesser degree. And it seems to fix it. And so I just get these alerts that it ran, and I go and I check it in Watchman or Adigy, and I see, yeah, sure enough, the backup is up to date. But it happens every time. So it's not like now it's fixed and it's just going to back up on its own. It's not going to back up again until my remediation runs again. So I get that every 5 days or whatever I have that set to just run the remediation and fix the Time Machine backup. But this used to be a supported scenario. How is it that this is just, I don't think it works anywhere. It just doesn't work to back up to a network drive anymore.
My theory is that's why Apple abandoned the whole airport line, was they couldn't support these time capsule
They couldn't figure it out either. Yeah.
No.
They gave up. They're like, just use Carbon Copy Cloner. It's fine.
So this client that I started out the session talking to you guys about, 49 days it hadn't backed up. And he was on a MacBook Pro, 2019, i7, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte drive. And once in a while, I get a random kernel panic report generated. And it would cross my desk. And what are you going to do when you see those most of the time? You guys don't reach out to the client when you get the kernel panic report, do you?
If I see 3 come in the course of a month or something, or if I happen to notice it in relation to something else I'm troubleshooting with them.
Yeah, but sometimes it's not like they can do anything different. It's shut down. But that just opens the door for you trying to figure out something that's going on with the computer that you have no idea is going on.
Talk about troubleshooting an annoying problem. Yeah.
Exactly. I didn't give it much thought. And then recently I had a phone conversation with him, complimentary, and we were trying to get the Time Machine volume going, and it didn't look like we were successful. But he said, I'm having trouble starting up my computer once in a while. He says, it'll take me like 2 or 3 tries, and the other first 2 tries, I'll get the circle with the line through it. Well, that's really bad. He said, we need to take a backup of your computer. That's telling us that there's something very serious. So he calls me a few days later. He can't get the Mac started. We had an up-to-date BackBlaze backup, and this Time Machine backup was 49 days old. I think it was from sometime in December. And so he says, what do I do? I brought it to the Apple store. Oh, this is rich. So he brings it to the Apple store, and they said, yeah, we think to reinstall the operating system is going to take care of it. So leave it here with us, and you can come back later to pick it up. And so he calls the next day, and he gets the runaround on the phone, and then finally gets somebody on the phone that says, we think it is the logic board, and we don't think it's just to reinstall the operating system. And I told him in the interim, I said, this is not going to fix it. Everything you've described to me, everything we talked about, this is a logic board issue. And sure enough, luckily the store identified it soon enough so he didn't have to take it back, spend a couple days with it, and then bring it back. So they quote him a price of $800 to fix it, which is, I think, level 3 pricing for that sort of a thing that's out of warranty. And I said, well, that's probably about what it's worth on the open market. I checked some eBay completed auctions and one that matched his spec. That's about what the value is. I said, you're at a real interesting time right now because Apple just released a brand new MacBook Pro. Gave him the full rundown. He goes back to the Apple store and he buys a pretty close to $3,000 MacBook Pro and brings it home. So in the meantime, we had gotten a recovery drive on its way from BackBlaze for, I think the price is $149, $189. They send it to you, you recover your data, you send it back, and all you have to pay for is the shipping, which I think is a really great value that they offer to their subscribers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that was going to take a few days. I was going to probably arrive today or the day after, and he wanted to get back on track. So I said, if you're open to this, we can use your Time Machine backup, because according to my reporting software, it told me that last backup back in December was successful. So he was running Catalina, and I did tell him that we're going to be upgrading to Ventura. So we did the dance. The new machine started. It identified that it needed to upgrade from 13.1 to 13.2. We had him do that. We created a test user. We logged in remotely after we installed our Adigy profile on there, and we kicked off the Time Machine Restore in that test user account. We waited for all the information to populate, all the sizes to be predetermined, and then made his password the same. And hours later, he gets a successful migration. And so we reconnect with him the next day. He's a heavy user of Dropbox. Whatever you do, don't sign into Dropbox. What I'd like to do is I'd like to fully deinstall Dropbox for you and toss out everything on that Time Machine volume that we restored on this brand new computer. And I just want to download a brand new copy of Dropbox, and we're just going to pull all the data down.
You wanted to make sure you didn't have a risk of the data restored from Time Machine overwriting the truth that's in the cloud of Dropbox. Okay.
Exactly, precisely. Or even something going sideways, because he's on an Intel Mac and Dropbox does make something that's written for or Apple Silicon compliant. And I just wanted to make sure that there were no hiccups there, because that's the really most important files to him. He agrees. The next morning we log in and everything seems fine. We go through some hoops to get Dropbox to properly install. That took a little while. We got a Dropbox text that we were chatting with, and he was clueless. And then I finally figured out what the right recipe was to get Dropbox to do what it needed to do. And of course, he downloaded an updated version of all his Creative Cloud apps because he's a graphics guy. And he seemed to be in great shape. And so I said, listen, I have a light day, but I'm going to be around, so you can ping me and we can jump back on if you have any other hiccups. along the way, but it looks like you're in pretty good shape. And he was happy to see his desktop looked the same and everything was a snapshot from that day. So it was like very successful time machine migration from Catalina to Ventura. A few hours later, he pings me and he says, Zoom's not working, the camera and the microphone. And that's one of his things that he uses for meetings. So we've seen this before. It's like the permissions issue, and you reset that permissions database for the microphone and for the camera. And that usually seems to make the Zoom app appear in what used to be system preferences and now system settings. But when we would go to camera or microphone, those boxes were completely empty, right? So I'm messing around with this for a while, and we're starting to accumulate more time. I did some command line execution of deleting that database. We rebooted the computer. We even did a brand new install, like a clean install of 13.2. And I said, look, let's kick this up the ladder. Let's get Apple on the phone. So we get an Apple senior technician on the phone. And one of the first things he said was, did you try this in safe boot? So I said, no. So we did a safe boot on an Apple Silicon machine, which is a little different than holding down the shift key, of course, with an Intel Mac. And so we properly did that. And safe boot didn't fix it. And the next thing he said was, why did you reinstall Ventura? And I said, why not? Yeah. Maybe it was a permissions issue. So the next thing he said was, all right, let's try to reset the home folder permissions. So we did that, booting off the options on the Silicon Mac. That doesn't fix it. So he said, did you create another test user? And I said, no, we could do that. So we go into system settings, and I go to users and groups, and there's nothing showing up on the right-hand pane for users and groups. His user doesn't show up. It's just empty. There's no way to add. There's no way to remove.
Your heart start beating fast?
Yeah. No, I said to him, have you ever seen this before? Oh, and there was one point where we were looking for some sort of a setting in system settings. And I said, where is that? And he goes, I don't know. They just move around so much. It was really funny to hear a senior technician say that. Yeah. And so we look in users and groups, and he can't figure it out either. Because I don't know. He said, something's wrong with the migration. I said, what do you mean something's wrong with the migration? Yeah. I said, we had a perfect time machine backup. It completed successfully. We got the green check mark. Everything was good. And what's going on here? He had no idea. He said, we don't know. We can't support this. He said, the only thing you can do, the only thing you can do is wipe the machine and maybe try to drag stuff in from the time machine backup. And I said to him, have you ever tried to do that? In the real world, have you ever tried to drag in stuff from a time machine backup? It's not straightforward. And then he said to me, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay. So I left that on the table. I went, okay. At the end of the day, we abandoned that. We wiped the machine again. We got rid of the technician off the phone. We wiped the machine again. We just started him up from scratch. Reconfigured his email, downloaded the Adobe apps, reinstalled Dropbox, and he wasn't able to recover from Catalina.
Jeez, man. And the senior tech, I like the way you described when he just seemed, he was just like, well, I don't know, we can't support this. He just threw up his hands at that point, and did he suggest the wipe, or did he just say, have a good day?
No, he suggested just erasing the drive and starting over, and then dragging the stuff in by hand. And I told my client, I said, that's going to take us hours to do that. Yeah. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, dragging by hand.
And what are we dragging in at that point?
Just drag it in.
Yeah. Drag in the garbage, right?
Yeah. The theme of the show is that don't worry that Time Machine can't complete a backup. It can't restore either. So it's like you're not really losing out. Wow, what a joke. So I have something that seems possibly related to this. And
let me just interject. Why are we even worrying about the Synology, how they have the new backup routine of being able to restore when Time Machine can't?
Yeah, exactly. Because that was my question, was like, can active backup on Synology restore? It's can Time Machine? Yeah, great question. And also the BackBlaze thing, which is like you said, they'll just overnight you a drive basically. So you can have.
Well, not overnight.
Oh, 2 days. What?
I think you can pay for an overnight.
Queue.
Yeah.
No, that's not an option. When you maybe to seed a backup, perhaps, but when it's coming to you, you put it in queue. There's no shipping options. It is what it is. You can't pick anything. You can't pick next day. You get it when you get it.
Still better than the competition of being Time Machine, which is unsupportable apparently. But yeah, that's always a good option. Even if it takes a few days, fine. They can still sign in, and like you did, just get them basically up and running more or less, and then you can still get the data sent to you. And it's not like direct though. Again, I mean, you need to like drag and drop. You need to copy it or clone it or whatever, but then reclaim the home folder. It's not like a straight restoration process from bare metal, as they say, but your data is there. The whole advantage of Time Machine is you can, in theory, just pick up where you leave off, but in practice, it doesn't always work that way. I had an issue that might have been a similar situation. This was similar in that it was an old user account, which was probably created, I don't know when, like probably Mojave or prior, probably much prior actually, and just upgraded and migrated forward over the years. And at the time, I think it was running Mojave, and we upgraded to Monterey. So that's not a huge leap, but it's enough of a leap. It's supposed to work. We did the script to remove the Spotlight indexes that can be problematic, or not the indexes, but the MD worker files or whatever. We did the installation. Everything seemed to go well. And then at the end of all of this, we couldn't log into the user account. We'd go to log into the user account, which was working fine prior to the upgrade, and it said that it was locked. User account is locked. So I said, all right, I had Adigy on there, luckily. So I created a new admin user, and then I tried to go in to delete this user account. And this is why I'm saying it might have been something similar to what you were describing, Jerry. I went in to delete the original problematic user account, and it was requiring me to put in their password, not just another admin password, but that original user account password. And I said, okay, fine, I have that password. That's not the problem here. So I'll just type in their user's password. And by the way, when I went to log into this user account on the login window, there was a difference between when I would type in the correct password and it would say the account is locked versus typing in some fake password and having it reject the password. So in other words, like it's accepting the password, but it's just telling me that the account is locked. Okay, so back to deleting the user account. Couldn't do it. I had to work around that issue. And apparently there was a bug at some point. I don't know if it's just a known issue with accounts that are created prior to a certain macOS version. And that's why I was wondering about Catalina. Or if it's just in certain cases, I don't know, you can go into directory utility and you can copy down the GUID of the user that's problematic and then like change that GUID by one digit. And then that lets you delete the user, or I forget if you have to. It was the crazy 16, whatever it is, how many digits GUID of that user ID. What used to just be like user ID 501, speaking of Sam's Twitter account. But it was like that like crazy long GUID. That's the identifier that, you know, is supposed to never change or something. But the problem is like that GUID for some reason. And I forget, it might have also had a user ID thing that I had to change separately. That let me delete the user. Okay, so I worked around that issue. And then I thought, all right, I left the home folder, obviously, right? Then I'll just recreate the user and reclaim the home folder. So I did all that. And then I go to log in and phew, we can now log in. It's not locked. It's working. And I'm getting to the desktop and I see their items on the desktop and I see the dock and everything's good. And then I'm having these annoying problems with Microsoft Office, of all things. Like I couldn't activate Microsoft Office. That was the first symptom. There were a couple of other like weird things, but nothing jumping out like this. So the issue with Microsoft Office was you go to activate it, right? It wants you to log in. So you go to log in, you put in the correct info, and then it says you're no longer logged in or your request timed out or something like that when it's trying to look up the licenses. So that should have been my clue that it was a keychain issue. But I spent the amount of time I tend to spend on these things troubleshooting it. And then I found...
Because you've got an infinite budget.
Yeah, I wish. So then I went into keychain access. I start to figure, I'm like, okay, maybe it is a keychain thing. Reset keychain, right? So you go in, you do in the preferences there, you reset the default keychain. So it's supposed to reset the login keychain. That all happens. Everything's fine. But it still didn't solve the problem. And I ultimately found that I had to move aside the keychains folder in the user library, just rename it keychains.old, and then reset the keychain just for good measure at that point. And then that's what worked. So the problem was there was some other files in the keychains folder that were not being reset as part of like resetting the default login keychain. That were corrupted or whatever the problem was, permissions issues, whatever, that didn't get fixed by this process. So I had to just blow that out. So it was part that I think might be relevant to yours is how the user account in your case wasn't displaying, and just that kind of issue where recreating the user probably would have been the right track. But in your case, you couldn't,
you couldn't even get there.
Yeah.
Now, When you were working on this problem, I had a similar problem, and you were spot on. It was another Microsoft authentication issue. In this case, it was on a Ventura machine, but we couldn't create a new login. We could create a new login, but we couldn't keep the old one. You couldn't even rename it old.
Gotcha. Yeah, all this stuff, I should recap this to myself and for my team and for anybody else who might benefit, the places to check. I remember 10 years ago, I mean, if you go back 20 years ago, it's a whole different story. Look at the extensions. That's about it, or control panels or whatever. Now with macOS 10, latest and greatest, there's a lot of places to check. And I'm not even really clear on places relate to which kind of scope of issues. There's the place I'm thinking of, the very common ones for me still that I check on an old Mac or after migration or whatever, but just out of habit. And again, I think I need to document this as we need to do this when we migrate a machine. User library, launch agents. That's a good one. The root library, launch agents, launch daemons, and startup items. So those are the normal places to look. And then there's all this new stuff. So keychains, okay, that could be related to you having weird issues with like your iCloud won't accept the password, your Microsoft won't activate, whatever. Could be a keychain thing in the keychain folder. Could be permissions there, could be corrupt data. Like sometimes you just got to blow that away. Other ones that came up recently, I had an issue where Mail was really slow to open. I don't think I mentioned this on the show yet, but the Mail app on a Monterey machine, I saw this in two different cases. Two different clients, Mail was really slow to open. You'd open it once in a while, it would be fast, but other times it would be like 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes before it would display the Mail window and be like interactive. But until then, is it opening? What's happening? So I had to remove the saved state in the user library, saved application state, in this case, com.apple.mail.savestate. Okay, now we have a place to look for that kind of issue, problems opening. Do you guys have any other thoughts on those kinds of new locations, like staged extensions or any other folders like that?
I think staged state has been a constant for a long time. That's a good one to look at when an application, especially, is having trouble opening. But even on Ventura now, there are all the login items and things to watch out for. And the other thing that I think is going to be a nuisance unless it's managed by some kind of MDM is all of the alerts for the background items that are getting it. You know what I mean? Like it's like a bunch of them. And then people are going to be like, what is this? What should I be doing about this? If you don't manage them, it's just going to be ticket after ticket. Yeah. You know? So not to get off track from your locations, Joe, but I was just thinking of the little nuisances that can annoy people and then start having them reach out to us.
Yeah, especially the bug in that one. I don't know if it's fixed in 13.2, but there was a bug where they would just reappear every time, like every reboot or something. Okay, it's just going to now people are really going to ignore that. Anytime scaryhackerapp.com wants to open like at login, they're going to ignore that because it's the boy who cried wolf. Like my Mac says that every time I restart. I just ignore it now. Right. Great solution, Apple. You can't, God, it's so frustrating when there's some really annoying bug like that. And it's going to have that side effect of causing people to just not trust the system. Plus, okay, fine. You see the prompt. You go to the thing, right? And then you review the login items. Bash is from an unidentified developer. Okay. What am I supposed to do about that as the user? It's just a list of 20 things on a normal system. I don't know. It's frustrating.
How about all the moronic things that you have to check off in security and privacy just to get the applications to work properly? I understand the reason, but they've got to hire us to go in there and do that for them. Otherwise, their applications don't work properly, like Zoom or Microsoft Office doesn't have access, or Teams or whatever it is, Microsoft Teams. There's so many things that you have to fix up and massage just to onboard a new Mac for somebody.
Yeah. I think to your point too, Jerry, like there are Adigi and tools like that can help deal with some of the privacy settings, but specifically Zoom and Teams that you're mentioning, you can't, if you're a standard user, you can't access the screen recording. So they're still going to have to reach out because of those privacy settings that Apple restricts to standard users. A lot of people still don't understand that stuff too. Why do I have to do this? I just want to use Zoom and do a presentation. But it's frustrating for sure.
Yeah, I think I try to zoom out and look at this kind of architecturally and think what would be better. I like the way that Apple tries to make all this stuff extensible. But now we have a entitlements framework for apps to request this kind of access. And then, yeah, we know about Zoom and we know about this and that, but what if a new app wants to come into the field and they can use the existing entitlement system, whatever. That's all great. It's not user-friendly if it's built as this generic looking system. What would work for the user is, hey, it looks like you just installed Zoom. Apple knows that this is a video conferencing app. You probably want Zoom to have access to your camera. And then they'd be like, yeah, definitely. And then what about your screen? Do you think you're going to share your screen? No, I never do that. I'm just attending. I'm not presenting. Okay. I'm not saying it would have to be phrased that way. There should be a simpler, clearer way that this stuff would work, or just do the right thing, help the user do the right thing. It's not so bad. It does, the first time they run it, it should ask them for that permission and whatever. And some apps handle it better than others. But when the system itself has all these issues, and when the side effect is like all this existing stuff that they already implicitly approved by having it installed keeps alerting every time, or it probably should alert when somebody upgrades to Ventura. And if it's like, if there was this like crazy sketchy hackerapp.com installed in the background or something, like you do want an alert about that. Okay, you probably didn't notice when you're running Monterey, but now that you upgraded to Ventura, we're going to let you know. But it's just not user-friendly. It's not that clear.
I wonder what it would cost Apple to bring in Clippy. Let's say they bought Clippy from Microsoft, yeah. And the little Clippy is on your screen, and he's telling you what to do all the time. I think that would be a good solution.
They might suffer from some copyright infringement there, but I don't know. We can come up with something new, like Appley or something clever that they can use instead of Clippy.
Wormy.
Command Control Power wouldn't exist without the support of our community. Special thanks to the following community members whose strong monthly support has sustained us for all these years. Ryan Gowdy, CoreCompetent.com. Weldon Dodd, Kanji.io. Richard Wingfield, EnvisionDesign.net. Adam Rice, AskAdam.io. Mac Admins Podcast, podcast.macadmins.org. Tim Nyberg, TheMacGuys.com. Michael Thompson, Origin84.com. Matthew Waples, Waples.net. Tom Puls, BoxIT.tech. Jerome Potters, PITPro.nl. Steve Sorbo, MacSOS.biz. Andy Espo, CallAndy.com. And Nate Sinall, WeAreScout.com. Thank you all very much, and thanks to our patrons at every level of support. If you enjoy the show, we really would love your support. And if you already support us and can increase your monthly pledge, we really do find that encouraging. CommandControlPower.com and click support. Thanks very much for listening and for supporting the show.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it